Hillary Clinton enters the CIA's black site. The files she uncovers change everything we know about 9/11. The autumn wind whipped around Hillary Clinton's shoulders as she stood before the unmarked building in rural Virginia. Her blue blazer offered little protection against the cold, but the chill she felt had nothing to do with the weather. 20 years of questions, of seeing grief etched into the faces of 9/11 families, had led her to this moment. "Ma'am." A young security guard approached, his hand resting casually on his holstered weapon. "This is a restricted area." Hillary pulled out her credentials, the special clearance she'd fought 3 months to obtain. "I have authorization." Her voice carried the weight of decades in public service, yet even she could hear the slight tremor in it. The guard's eyes widened slightly as he examined her ID. "Of course, Secretary Clinton. I just need to verify this." He disappeared into the guard booth, speaking quietly into his radio. Hillary used the moment to steady herself. The late September sun was setting behind the trees, casting long shadows. Across the facility's parking lot, she thought back to the strange meeting that had set this all in motion. 2 months earlier, Georgetown. "More tea, Sarah." Hillary gestured to the delicate china pot on her living room table. The young woman across from her shook her head, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. Sarah Chen, a junior CIA analyst, looked out of place in Hillary's elegant home. Her discount store blazer, a sharp contrast to the refined surroundings. "Mrs. Clinton, I shouldn't be here." Sarah's voice quivered. "If they find out, no one knows you're here," Hillary assured her, though her own heart was racing. Getting this meeting arranged had required calling in favors from people who owed her from her Secretary of State days. "Tell me what you found." Sarah glanced nervously at the windows. "It started with a routine digital archiving project. We're converting old files, and I noticed something. Discrepancies in the 9/11 files." "What kind of discrepancies?" "Missing documents. But not just missing, deliberately removed. And the ones that are there." Sarah's voice dropped to a whisper. "The timeline doesn't match. There are meetings that happened that aren't in any official record. Money transfers that don't make sense." Hillary leaned forward. "Sarah, are you absolutely sure about this?" The young analyst pulled a folded paper from her purse, hands trembling. "This is a list of file numbers. They're in the Black Site archive facility. I can't access them. But you, with your clearance level." Hillary took the paper, the weight of it far heavier than its few grams should allow. "Why are you telling me this? Why not go through official channels?" Sarah's eyes filled with tears. "Because 3 people already tried. One had a fatal car accident. One had a heart attack at 42. And one disappeared." She stood abruptly. "I should go. I've been here too long." "Wait," Hillary started, but Sarah was already hurrying toward the door. "Just..." Sarah paused, her hand on the doorknob. "Be careful who you trust. And if something happens to me, nothing will happen to you," Hillary said firmly, but they both knew it was a promise she might not be able to keep. "Secretary Clinton?" The guard's voice snapped her back to the present. He held out her ID, along with a visitor's badge. "You're cleared for access. Agent Pierce will escort you to the archives." A tall man in a dark suit emerged from the building. Douglas Pierce had the kind of face that was designed to be forgotten. Average height, average build, unremarkable features. Only his eyes stood out, sharp and watchful. "This way, please." His tone was professional but cool. Hillary followed him through a series of security checkpoints, each more stringent than the last. The building's bland exterior gave way to increasingly restricted areas, the walls changing from standard office beige to institutional gray. "You know," Pierce said as they waited for an elevator, "it's unusual to see someone of your former position here." Hillary met his gaze steadily. "Sometimes the unusual becomes necessary, Agent Pierce." The elevator descended deeper than she expected, the air growing noticeably cooler. When the doors opened, they faced a long corridor lined with security cameras. The archive room is through there. Pierce gestured to a heavy metal door at the end of the hall. You'll need to surrender any electronic devices. That wasn't mentioned in my clearance authorization. Pierce's smile didn't reach his eyes. Standard protocol for this level, ma'am. You understand. Hillary hesitated, then handed over her phone. She'd anticipated this possibility. The photos on her phone were already backed up to a secure server. The real question was whether they'd search her thoroughly enough to find the miniature camera disguised as a brooch on her lapel. The archive room was vast, larger than she'd expected. Row upon row of filing cabinets stretched into the shadows, each containing pieces of America's darkest moments. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting a harsh glare that made her eyes ache. You have 3 hours, Pierce said. I'll be outside if you need anything. The door closed behind him with a heavy click. Hillary stood still for a moment, letting her eyes adjust to the light. Sarah's list of file numbers felt like it was burning a hole in her pocket. But she couldn't go straight to them. That would be too obvious. She needed to make this look like general research. She started with files from the late 1990s, building a credible paper trail of someone researching pre-9/11 intelligence. Her heart was pounding so hard she was sure the security cameras must be picking up her tension. An hour passed, then another. She worked methodically, making occasional notes, playing the role of a thorough researcher. Only then did she casually make her way to the cabinet marked September 2001. The first file seemed normal enough. Routine intelligence reports, threat assessments, the kind of documentation she'd seen before. But as she dug deeper, following Sarah's numbered trail, things began to change. A memo dated August 15th, 2001, caught her eye. The header was standard, but the distribution list made her pause. Names that shouldn't have been there. Connections that didn't make sense. Then she found the photo. The man in the expensive suit. His companion's face carefully removed. The date stamp made her blood run cold. September 10th, 2001. Her fingers trembled as she turned to the next page. The text was brief, but its implications were staggering. This wasn't just about intelligence failures or missed opportunities. This was something else entirely. Finding everything you need, Madam Secretary. Hillary jumped. Pierce stood in the doorway, his expression unreadable. How long had he been watching? Yes, thank you. She kept her voice steady, decades of political experience coming to her aid, though some of these files seemed to be out of order. Really? Pierce stepped closer. Which ones? Hillary indicated a random folder, her heart racing. These dates don't seem to match the cabinet labels. Pierce leaned in to look, and for a moment, Hillary caught a whiff of his aftershave. Something flickered in his eyes. Doubt. Fear. I'll have someone look into that. He straightened up. You have 30 minutes remaining. After he left, Hillary waited exactly 3 minutes before returning to the crucial files. Her miniature camera clicked silently, capturing page after page. The truth was here, hidden in plain sight among thousands of ordinary documents. A handwritten note fluttered from between the pages. Her breath caught as she read it. A message from George Tenet, then director of the CIA, dated September 10th, 2001. The contents made her stomach lurch. Without thinking, she slipped it into her jacket pocket. The final minutes ticked by too quickly. Hillary carefully returned the files to their proper places, making sure everything looked undisturbed. But as she prepared to leave, she knew with absolute certainty that nothing would ever be the same. The weight of what she'd discovered pressed down on her like a physical force. The faces of the 9/11 families flashed through her mind. All those years of pain, of questions, of hoping for answers. Now she had them, but they were far worse than anyone had imagined. Ready to go, Madam Secretary? Pierce was back, holding her phone. Hillary nodded, her expression carefully neutral. Thank you for your assistance, Agent Pierce. As they walked back through the facility, she could feel his eyes on her. Did he know? Had the cameras caught her using the hidden camera? Were they already planning how to contain this? The sun had fully set by the time she emerged from the building. The autumn wind felt colder now. Or maybe it was just the chill of knowledge she never wanted to have. In her car, Hillary sat for a long moment before starting the engine. The documents she'd photographed, the note in her pocket, they changed everything. The official narrative of 9/11 that had shaped 2 decades of American history was built on a foundation of lies. She thought of Sarah Chen, the young analyst, who'd risked everything to bring this to her attention. She needed to warn her, to make sure she was safe. But first, she had to secure what she'd found. As Hillary drove away from the facility, she didn't notice the black SUV that pulled out several cars behind her. In her mind, she was already planning her next moves, knowing that every step would have to be perfect. The truth about 9/11 was finally within reach, but getting it out to the world would be the greatest challenge of her life. And somewhere in the gathering darkness, forces were already moving to stop her. The drive back to Georgetown felt longer than usual. Hillary's mind raced through possibilities, each scenario more dangerous than the last. She took 3 extra turns, a habit from her Secretary of State days, watching for tails. The black SUV stayed with her, though it kept its distance. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. Hello? They know. Sarah's voice was barely a whisper. Mrs. Clinton, they're already moving. My apartment. They were here when I got home. Everything's gone. Hillary's grip tightened on the steering wheel. Are you safe? I'm at my sister's. But I don't think... A muffled sob. I found something else. Something big. Can we meet? Not tonight, Hillary said firmly. They'll be watching. Tomorrow morning, 7 a.m., the coffee shop on Wisconsin Avenue. The one with the broken neon sign. How will I know it's safe? If I'm wearing a red scarf, everything's clear. If not, keep walking. Hillary ended the call, her mind already spinning. The note in her pocket felt like it was burning through her jacket. She needed to document everything before they could stop her. Her Georgetown townhouse was dark when she arrived. Hillary did her usual security check, a habit her protection detail had drilled into her years ago. Everything looked normal, but something felt off. She found out why when she entered her study. Evening, Madam Secretary. Douglas Pierce sat in her leather chair, a manila folder in his lap. 2 other men in dark suits stood by the windows. We need to talk. Hillary's hand inched toward her phone. Please don't, Pierce said softly. This conversation needs to stay between us. Breaking and entering is a federal crime, Agent Pierce. He smiled thinly. So is removing classified documents from a secure facility. Hillary's blood ran cold, but decades in politics had taught her to keep her face neutral. I don't know what you're talking about. Pierce opened the folder. 7 minutes after you entered the archive room, you activated a miniature camera. Quite clever, disguising it as a brooch. Our tech team is quite impressed. He looked up. But that's not what concerns me most. What concerns me is what you're planning to do with what you saw. The American people deserve the truth. The truth? Pierce laughed, but there was no humor in it. Mrs. Clinton, you've spent your entire life in politics. You know there's no such thing as the truth. There are only stories we tell to keep the peace. 3,000 people died that day, and millions more would die if the real story got out. Pierce stood up. Think about it. The entire international order, decades of alliances, the global financial system. It would all collapse. Is that what you want your legacy to be? Hillary moved to her desk, keeping her distance from the men. What do you want? We want to help you make the right choice. Pierce's voice was reasonable, almost kind. Your service to this country is appreciated. Your reputation, your future, your family's safety. These are all important things. Things worth protecting. The threat was clear, wrapped in diplomatic language. And if I refuse? Pierce sighed. Then things become complicated. Ask yourself, is this worth dying for? Worth watching everything you've built destroyed? For what? A truth no one really wants to know? A long silence filled the room. Hillary looked out her window at the Washington night, the city lights twinkling like stars. Somewhere out there, Sarah Chen was hiding, terrified. Somewhere, the families of 9/11 victims were going to bed still believing the official story. "I'll need time to think about it," she said finally. Pierce nodded. "You have 24 hours. Choose wisely." He placed a card on her desk. "When you're ready, to be reasonable, call this number." After they left, Hillary sat in the darkness for a long time. The note from George Tenet was still in her pocket, its contents now seared into her memory. The photos from the archive were already uploaded to a secure server, waiting. She thought about Pierce's words. He was right about one thing. The truth would shake the world to its foundations. But he was wrong about everything else. Her phone buzzed again. Another unknown number. "Yes? Mrs. Clinton?" A man's voice, one she didn't recognize. "I was a first responder at Ground Zero. I saw things that never made it into any report. I heard you were asking questions." Hillary sat up straighter. "How did you get this number?" "That doesn't matter. What matters is that there are more of us. People who know pieces of the truth. We've been waiting for someone with the power to do something about it. It's dangerous," she warned. "Living with this secret for 20 years has been dangerous enough." The man's voice cracked. "We're ready to talk. Are you ready to listen?" Hillary looked at Pierce's card on her desk. Then, she thought of Sarah Chen, of the first responder on the phone, of all the others who had carried this burden for so long. "Yes," she said. "I'm ready. But we need to be smart about this. Very smart." As she hung up, Hillary Clinton began to plan. She had 24 hours before Pierce expected her answer. 24 hours to set in motion something that couldn't be stopped. The truth about 9/11 was like a living thing now, growing stronger with each person who dared to speak it. And no matter what it cost her, she was going to make sure it got out. 3 hours had passed since Hillary discovered the files, and already her world was shifting beneath her feet. She sat in her study, the morning sun casting long shadows across her desk. The secure phone she'd used to photograph the documents lay before her, a digital lifeline containing truths that could reshape history. A knock at her door made her jump. "Mrs. Clinton." It was Janet, her longtime housekeeper. "There's a man here from the electric company. Says there's an urgent issue." Hillary's pulse quickened. "Did he show ID?" "Yes, ma'am. Looks proper enough. Tell him I'll be right there." She quickly transferred the photos to an encrypted drive, her fingers flying over the keyboard. The electrical issue was too convenient, too perfectly timed. In the foyer, a man in a utility worker's uniform stood waiting. His boots were spotless, his hands too smooth for someone who worked with wires and cables. "Good morning, ma'am." He smiled. "We've detected some unusual power fluctuations in the area." "Have you?" Hillary kept her voice casual. "That's strange. I haven't noticed anything. Mind if I check your main panel? Just to be safe." "Of course." She led him to the basement, watching as he made a show of examining the electrical box. His eyes, she noticed, kept drifting to the corners of the room, to her computer setup, to the filing cabinets along the wall. "Everything looks good here," he said finally. "But we'll need to do some follow-up checks. You might see our trucks in the area for the next few days." "How convenient," Hillary replied dryly. As she showed him out, she spotted the black SUV parked across the street, the same one from last night. Her phone buzzed. "Sarah Chen. They're watching my sister's place," Sarah whispered. "I had to leave through the back window, like some kind of spy movie." She gave a hysterical little laugh. "Where are you now?" "A motel off I-95, room 214. I found something else in the archives before they scrubbed my access. Something about the money trails. It's bigger than we thought, Mrs. Clinton. So much bigger. Stay there. I'm sending someone to get you." "Who? How will I know I can trust them?" Hillary thought quickly. "They'll say Arkansas winters are cold. You respond, but New York summers are worse. Got it? Yes. Please hurry. Hillary ended the call and immediately dialed another number. After 3 rings, a familiar voice answered. Well, if it isn't, the lady herself. Mike, I need a favor. A big one. Mike Thompson had been her personal security advisor during her Senate years. Now retired, he ran a private security firm that specialized in delicate matters. Must be serious if you're calling. This line. I need you to pick up a package. Very carefully. Very quietly. Hot package. Radioactive. A low whistle. Location? She gave him Sarah's motel information and the recognition phrase. Get her somewhere safe. Off the grid. And Mike. Like old times. No questions asked. Like old times. He agreed. But, Hillary, be careful. Words going around in certain circles. People are nervous. They should be. After hanging up, Hillary moved quickly. The photos from the CIA archives needed to be secured. She began sending encrypted fragments to different secure servers around the world. Each piece meaningless on its own, but devastating when combined. A text message buzzed. Unknown number. Turn on CNN. She grabbed the remote. Breaking news banner. Tragic accident claims life of former CIA analyst, Sarah Chen, 29, killed in single-car crash on I-95. No, Hillary whispered. No, no, no. Her phone rang again. Mike, she's not there, he said without preamble. Room's been cleaned. Recently. Professionally. Hillary's mind raced. Sarah had just called her. Unless that call had been used to track her location. Unless they'd forced her to make it before. The doorbell rang, making her jump. Through the security camera, she saw Agent Pierce on her doorstep, immaculate in his dark suit despite the early hour. Gotta go, she told Mike, and ended the call. Pierce smiled when she opened the door. Bad news travels fast, doesn't it? He held up his phone, showing the CNN article. Terrible tragedy. These mountain roads can be so treacherous. Cut the act, Hillary snapped. We both know what this is. Do we? Pierce stepped inside without waiting for an invitation. Sometimes an accident is just an accident. Just like, sometimes old CIA files are best left alone. She was 29 years old. Yes, so young. Such a promising career ahead of her. Pierce's eyes hardened. Could have had a full life if she'd made better choices. If certain people hadn't encouraged her to dig too deep. Hillary felt sick. What do you want? The same thing I wanted last night. The files you photographed. The note you took. Don't bother denying it. We have it on camera. And your word that this ends here. Or what? Another accident? Pierce sighed. Mrs. Clinton, you've served this country for decades. You know how this works. Sometimes, to protect the many, sacrifices must be made. Is that what you tell yourself? When you arrange accidents for 29-year-old women, better one tragedy than millions. Pierce moved closer. You haven't even seen the whole picture yet. You think those files tell the whole story? They're just the surface. Push this, and you'll unleash things you can't imagine. Try me. Pierce pulled out his phone, showed her another news article. A small fire in her lawyer's office. A minor break-in at her daughter Chelsea's house. Nothing taken. Just a message. It doesn't have to be this way, he said softly. Work with us. Help us maintain order. Your country needs you to do the right thing. Hillary walked to her window, looking out at the peaceful Georgetown street. Somewhere out there, Sarah Chen's family was getting the worst news of their lives. A young woman was dead because she'd trusted Hillary Clinton to protect her. The right thing, she repeated. Like on September 10th, 2001, when George Tenet wrote that note. Pierce's face tightened. You have no idea what you're playing with. Don't. The money trails, the missing minutes in the flight recordings, the meetings that never happened. She turned to face him. How many people know Agent Pierce? How many carry pieces of this secret? Fewer than yesterday, he said coldly. And that number will keep dropping until this is contained. Hillary's hand slipped into her pocket, feeling the reassuring shape of her phone. The recording app had been running since Pierce arrived, one copy automatically uploading to a secure server. Here's what's going to happen, she said. You're going to leave my house. You're going to call off your surveillance. And you're going to pray that what happens next doesn't destroy you along with everyone else involved in this cover-up. Pierce laughed. Or what? You'll go to the press. They won't touch this. The courts? They'll bury it. Congress? Please. He stepped closer. Face reality, Madam Secretary. You're alone in this. The doorbell rang again. This time, when Hillary checked the camera, she saw Mike Thompson. And behind him, very much alive, was Sarah Chen. Am I? Hillary smiled at Pierce. Want to check? CNN again. Pierce's phone buzzed. His face went pale as he read whatever message had just arrived. This isn't over, he said, but his voice had lost its confidence. No, Hillary agreed. It's just beginning. After Pierce left, Hillary hurried to let Mike and Sarah in. The young analyst was pale but determined. They grabbed me at the motel, Sarah explained. But Mr. Thompson's team was already in place. They used someone else's body for the crash, made it look like me. She shuddered. They were going to kill me. They still might, Mike warned. But for now, we've got her. And we've got this. He held up a thumb drive. Everything they tried to erase from her computer. Everything they didn't know she had backed up. Hillary looked at the drive, then at Sarah's determined face, thinking of the photos she'd taken, the note in her pocket, the recording of Pierce's threats. Okay, she said. Let's see what we're really dealing with. As Mike set up a secure laptop, Hillary thought about Pierce's words. He was right about one thing. This went deeper than even she had imagined. But he was wrong about her being alone. The truth about 9/11 had been buried for 20 years, protected by people willing to kill to keep it hidden. But the truth had a way of finding its own allies. And Hillary Clinton had spent a lifetime learning how to fight battles everyone said were unwinnable. Ready? Sarah asked, her hands hovering over the laptop keyboard. Hillary nodded. Show me everything. The next few hours would change their lives forever. But more importantly, they would change history. The only question was, how many more people would die before the truth finally came out? Sarah's fingers flew over the laptop keyboard as images and documents flashed across the screen. Mike stood guard by the window, occasionally checking his phone for updates from his security team. Look at this. Sarah pointed to a financial document. Wire transfers, September 7th, 2001. Through a series of shell companies, but all leading back to the same source. Hillary leaned closer. These amounts, exactly. Too big to hide completely, too important to stop. Sarah pulled up another file. And here's where it gets interesting. These names, they show up in the CIA files you photographed, don't they? Yes, but Hillary's voice trailed off as a new document appeared on screen. Wait. Go back. It was an email chain, heavily redacted but with one name left visible. A name that shouldn't have been there. That's impossible, Mike said, looking over their shoulders. He wasn't even in position then. Unless... Sarah's face went pale. Unless everything we thought we knew about the command structure was wrong. A sharp knock at the door made them all jump. Mike drew his weapon, moving silently to the security panel. It's Thompson's team, he said, relaxing slightly. But they're early. 2 men in civilian clothes entered quickly. The older one, gray-haired and weathered, spoke first. We've got trouble. Pierce made calls. Lots of calls. How bad? Hillary asked. Bad enough that some old friends at the agency felt the need to warn us. They're mobilizing a containment team. Containment? Sarah's voice shook. It's a nice word for cleanup. Mike explained grimly. We need to move. Now. Hillary gestured. To the laptop. What about this? Already backed up to 3 separate secure locations. Sarah said. Dead man switch protocol. If anything happens to any of us. Good girl. Mike approved. But let's try to stay alive anyway. Mrs. Clinton, you got a go bag ready? Hillary was already moving to her study. Inside a hidden wall safe, behind a false panel, she kept an emergency kit. Cash, untraceable phones, alternate ID. The habits of a lifetime in high-stakes politics had taught her to be prepared. Where are we going? Sarah asked as they hurried. To the garage. Better if you don't know yet. Mike replied. We're splitting up. Different routes, different destinations. Harder to track. Hillary felt the weight of George Tenet's note in her pocket. I need to make one stop first. With all due respect, ma'am, that's a terrible idea. Nevertheless, Mike knew that tone. He'd heard it enough times during her Senate years to know arguing was pointless. 20 minutes, he conceded. Then we go dark. They took Mike's security team's car, leaving Hillary's untouched. As they pulled out of the garage, Hillary spotted 2 black SUVs turning onto her street. Right on schedule, Mike muttered. They drove in tense silence, taking a circuitous route through DC's morning traffic. Hillary directed them to a small law office in Alexandria. Wait here, she told the others. Inside, an elderly receptionist looked up in surprise. Mrs. Clinton, we weren't expecting… Is James in? Yes, but… Hillary was already moving past her to the corner office. James Martinez looked up from his desk, his face registering shock. My God, Hillary. I was just reading about Sarah Chen. Is it true? Nothing is true anymore, James. She closed his door. Remember that conversation we had? About arrangements? His face turned serious. The sealed documents? Hillary, you said those were just in case. Well, this is the case. She handed him a USB drive. Everything is here. The account numbers, the evidence, the names. If anything happens to me, don't talk like that. If anything happens, she continued firmly, you release everything. All of it. Every major news outlet. Every oversight committee. Every victim's family lawyer. James stared at the drive. They'll try to stop it. They can't stop all of it. Not if it goes out everywhere at once. A text from Mike. Company coming. Hurry. I have to go. Hillary said. Remember, everything, all at once. No warnings, no negotiations. Hillary, James called as she reached the door. Be careful. These people, they play for keeps. So do I. Back in the car, Mike was tense. We've got a tail. 2 cars back. Blue sedan. Take the tunnel. His gray-haired colleague suggested. We've got people there. As they approached the tunnel, Hillary saw motorcycle cops moving into position. Just before they entered the darkness, she caught a glimpse of the blue sedan being boxed in by unmarked cars. Your people? She asked Mike. Let's just say there are still some folks in law enforcement who remember their real duty. They emerged from the tunnel onto a different route. No tail in sight. Hillary's phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Meeting set. Original players confirmed. The truth will come. She showed it to Sarah, whose eyes widened. The first responders, Sarah whispered. They're really going to talk? They've been waiting 20 years, Hillary replied. We just needed to show them it was possible. Mike's phone chirped. He listened briefly, his face growing darker. Pierce is meeting with the director. Right now. Good, Hillary said, surprising them all. Good, Sarah asked. They're scared. When people are scared, they make mistakes. Hillary looked out at the passing city, and right now, a lot of powerful people are very, very scared. The car turned onto a private airstrip where a small jet waited. Hillary thought about Pierce's threats, about Sarah's accident, about all the others who had died protecting this secret. But she also thought about the truth hidden in those files, about the families who deserved answers. About a country built on lies for 20 years. Last chance to back out, Mike said quietly. Hillary Clinton straightened her jacket, feeling the weight of the evidence they carried, the weight of history itself. Next stop? She asked. Safe house in Vermont. Off the grid. We can regroup, plan our next move. As they boarded the plane, Hillary saw more black SUVs approaching the airstrip. But it was too late. For them, and for all the others who had helped bury the truth about 9/11. The wheels lifted off the runway, carrying with them the biggest secret in American history. And Hillary Clinton, who had spent her life in the corridors of power, was about to bring it all crashing down. The Vermont safe house turned out to be a rustic cabin nestled deep in the Green Mountains. For 48 hours, the threats had been mounting. Hillary stood by the window, watching the sun set behind snow-capped peaks. Her secure phone buzzed constantly with warnings and updates. Another one? Sarah called from her laptop. They're getting bolder with the intimidation. She turned the screen to show a news article about a mysterious break-in at Chelsea Clinton's house. Hillary's jaw tightened. Are Chelsea and the kids safe? Mike confirmed, entering the room. My team moved them to a secure location before the break-in. Nothing was taken. But the message was clear. Hillary finished. Her phone crackled with strange interference. They were trying to track them. A knock at the door made everyone freeze. Mike drew his weapon, moving silently to the security camera feed. It's Thompson, he said, relief evident in his voice. The gray-haired security expert entered, shaking snow from his coat. His face was grim. We've got movement in Washington. Pierce met with the director again, then with someone from the Saudi embassy. They're pulling out all the stops. Sarah hugged her laptop closer. They know what we have, don't they? They know we have pieces, Thompson corrected. But they don't know which ones. That's why they're panicking. Hillary pulled George Tenet's note from her pocket, reading it again though she'd memorized every word. We need to move faster. Every hour we wait. A burst of static from their secure radio interrupted her. Through the interference, a voice crackled. Compromised. They found. Moving in. Mike was already in motion. Pack up. 5 minutes. Wait, Sarah called. Look at this. She turned her laptop around. On the screen was a new email. Sender unknown. I was there. Ground zero. What I saw. Meeting tonight. Joey's Diner, Rutland. 8 p.m. Come alone. It's a trap, Mike said immediately. Maybe, Hillary agreed. Or maybe it's what we've been waiting for. She turned to Thompson. How far is Rutland? Hour and a half in this weather. But Mrs. Clinton, it's too risky. I'll go, Sarah volunteered. Everyone turned to look at her. They're not watching for me. They think I'm dead, remember? Hillary studied the young analyst's face. The fear was still there, but something else too. Determination. Not alone, she decided. Mike, can you... Already planning the route. He pulled out a map. But we do this smart. Thompson's team on perimeter. Sarah wired. Back up in place. An hour later, they were parked across from Joey's Diner, a weathered building on the outskirts of Rutland. Snow fell softly, reducing visibility, both a blessing and a curse. Remember, Mike said, adjusting Sarah's hidden microphone. Any sign of trouble, you get out. Don't try to be a hero. Sarah nodded, her hands shaking slightly as she buttoned her coat. What if it really is a first responder? What do I say? Let them talk. Hillary advised from the back seat. 20 years is a long time to carry a secret. People want to tell their stories. They watched as Sarah crossed the street, disappearing into the diner. Minutes ticked by. Through the wire, they could hear her ordering coffee, the clink of a mug, the mundane sounds of a small-town diner at night. Then, you Sarah? A man's voice, rough with age or emotion. Through the diner's window, they could see Sarah nod. Worked Tower 1 security. the man said quietly. Was there when it happened? But that's not why I'm here. Why are you here? Sarah's voice was steady. Because of what I saw the night before. September 10th. Men in suits, after hours. They knew their way around, had clearance. They went to floors that were supposed to be empty. In the car, Hillary leaned forward, listening intently. Did you report it? To who? The man laughed bitterly. Next day, building's gone. Everyone's dead. Then the suits show up again. Different ones, asking questions about what I saw, who I talked to. Made it clear some questions shouldn't be asked. But you're asking them now, Sarah prompted. My cancer's back. Terminal this time. Got maybe 6 months. Figure what can they do to me now? Through the wire, they heard papers rustling. What's this? Security logs, visitor records. Kept copies all these years. Never knew why. Just couldn't let it go. Suddenly, Mike sat up straight. Movement. Back entrance. Hillary saw them too. Dark figures moving through the snow. Get her out of there. Wait, Thompson said. Look. Another group of men was approaching, but these were different. They moved with military precision, taking up positions around the diner. Friends of yours? Hillary asked. Thompson smiled grimly. Let's just say some people in special forces take their oath to the Constitution very seriously. Inside the diner, the conversation continued. There's more, the security guard was saying. Names, dates, times that don't match the official record. And this. More paper rustling. Found it in the stairwell next morning, before the first plane hit. My God, Sarah whispered. Sarah. Mike's voice crackled through her earpiece. Time to go. Company's coming. They watched as she stood, carefully, tucking the documents into her coat. Thank you, she told the guard. Your country owes you. Don't thank me. He cut her off. Just make sure the truth comes out. Make it mean something. Sarah exited the diner just as 2 black SUVs pulled into the parking lot. But before they could move, the Special Forces team Thompson had called emerged from the shadows. A brief, tense standoff ended with the SUVs backing away. Back in the car, Sarah's hands were shaking as she handed Hillary the documents. It's all here. Everything he saw. Everything they tried to hide. Hillary spread the papers across her lap. In the dim car light, dates and names jumped out at her. Names that matched the CIA files. Times that filled the gaps in the official timeline. This is it, she breathed. The missing piece. Mrs. Clinton. Mike interrupted urgently. We've got movement on the police band. State troopers, FBI. Everyone's converging on this area. They're desperate now, Thompson observed. Getting sloppy. Hillary looked at the documents again, then at Sarah's determined face, thinking of the security guard in the diner, dying but still fighting for the truth. Good, she said, because we're about to break this whole thing wide open. How? Sarah asked. Hillary pulled out her phone, dialing a number she hadn't used in years. After 3 rings, a familiar voice answered. Do you know what time it is? Marcus? It's Hillary Clinton. Remember that favor you owe me. Time to pay up. Hillary. Jesus. What's going on? I've been hearing things. The truth about 9/11, Marcus. All of it. I need your team at the Times ready to move. Fast. A long pause. They'll try to stop it. National security. Classified information. That's why we're not just going to the Times. We're going everywhere. All at once. No one can stop it if it's coming from 100 different directions. Another pause. Give me 12 hours to get my people in place. You have 6. And Marcus? Watch your back. These people, they're playing for keeps. As she hung up, Hillary noticed everyone in the car staring at her. What happens now? Sarah asked softly. Now? Hillary looked at the documents in her lap, thinking of George Tennett's note. The CIA files. everything they'd discovered. Now we light the fuse and watch it burn. They drove through the snowy night, putting distance between themselves and Rutland. Behind them, sirens wailed as various agencies searched for them. But they were already gone, carrying with them the truth that would change everything. The next few hours would determine whether 20 years of lies would finally crumble, whether the real story of 9/11 would finally come to light, whether the truth could actually set them free or get them all killed. Dawn was breaking over the Green Mountains when Hillary's secure phone buzzed again. The caller ID showed unknown, but she recognized the voice immediately. "They're moving up the timetable," Marcus from the Times said without preamble. "My sources say Pierce is calling in every favor, making threats. They know something's coming." Hillary watched Sarah sleeping fitfully on the cabin's couch, the young analyst finally exhausted after hours of organizing their evidence. "How much pressure are you getting?" Editorials already had calls from the CIA, FBI, and 2 senators. All unofficial, of course. Just friendly reminders about national security protocols. And I've got my best people in a secure room, working on the story. No phones, no internet. Old school. Mike appeared in the doorway, gesturing urgently. Hillary wrapped up the call and followed him to the kitchen. "We've got movement," he said, showing her his tablet. "Private jets taking off from all the major airports. Saudi diplomats, business leaders, people connected to the money trail. They're running," Hillary murmured, "like rats from a sinking ship." Mike zoomed in on one flight path. "This one's interesting. Headed to a private airstrip in Abu Dhabi. Guess who's on board?" Hillary leaned closer. "Pierce?" Along with 3 people from that list in the CIA files. The ones who had that meeting on September 10th. Sarah stumbled into the kitchen, rubbing her eyes. "Something's happening. My alerts are going crazy." She opened her laptop, showing them multiple news sites. "Look, stock market's volatile. Rumors of a major national security story about to break." Hillary's phone buzzed again. This time, the number was all too familiar. "Hello, Bill." "Hills." Her husband's voice was tense. "Chelsea just called me. Said men were at the house asking questions. What's going on? Are you somewhere secure?" "At the farm." Secret Service increased the detail, but won't say why. "Hillary, are you okay?" "I'm about to do something, Bill. Something big. When it happens..." She took a deep breath. "Things are going to get ugly." A long pause. "The thing about September, the files Sarah Chen found. You knew?" "I heard rumors. During my administration, there were whispers. Things that didn't add up. But every time we pulled that thread, people died." Hillary finished. "Be careful, Hills. These people, they've killed to keep this quiet for 20 years. They won't stop now." As if to emphasize his point, Thompson burst into the kitchen. "Turn on the TV. Now." They crowded around the small television. Breaking news banner. Multiple explosions reported at law offices in D.C. area. Among those affected, prominent attorney James Martinez. "Oh, God," Sarah whispered. Hillary was already dialing. James's phone went straight to voicemail. She tried. His secretary, his partners, anyone who might know. Finally, a text came through. "USB safe. Protocol activated. Good luck." "What does that mean?" Mike asked. Hillary felt a weight lift from her shoulders. "It means we're not alone in this fight anymore." She turned to the others. "James was our backup plan. If anything happened to him, the evidence would automatically go to multiple sources. Law firms, journalists, victims' families' lawyers. So even if they stop the Times..." Sarah's eyes widened with understanding. "Exactly. The truth is already out there, spreading. They can't contain it anymore." The cabin's secure radio crackled. One of Thompson's men. Movement on the access road. Multiple vehicles. Mike was already moving. "How'd they find us?" "Doesn't matter," Hillary said. "We've done what we needed to do here." She turned to Sarah. Are you ready? The young analyst squared her shoulders. They killed my career, faked my death, and tried to bury the truth. Yeah, I'm ready. They moved quickly, grabbing go bags and essential equipment. Through the windows, they could see headlights approaching through the pre-dawn gloom. Mrs. Clinton, Mike said quietly, whatever happens next, it's been an honor. Hillary Clinton looked at the small group around her. The ex-CIA analyst who'd risked everything for the truth. The security professionals who'd chosen conscience over orders. All the others who'd helped them get this far. The honor is mine, she said. Now let's go make history. As they slipped out the cabin's back entrance into the snowy woods, Hillary thought about all the pieces now in motion. The Times preparing their story. James's deadman switch spreading the evidence far and wide. The Saudi connections running for cover. 20 years of lies were about to come crashing down. The real story of 9/11 was finally going to see the light of day. And not even the most powerful people in the world could stop it now. Dawn was breaking over Washington, D.C. as Hillary Clinton sat in a secure hotel room, surrounded by stacks of evidence. Sarah Chen worked frantically at 3 laptops, preparing their digital arsenal. In less than an hour, everything would change. Are you absolutely sure about this? Mike asked, standing by the window. Once we pull this trigger, look at this, Hillary interrupted, spreading photos across the table. Every face, every signature, every document they tried to bury. The families deserve to know. Her secure phone rang. Marcus from the Times. We're ready, he said without preamble. Full digital package, print edition, everything. But Hillary, the pressure's intense. I've got government officials practically camping in our lobby. How long can you hold? Maybe an hour. They're trying to get an emergency injunction. Sarah looked up from her laptops. Other outlets are picking up chatter. Everyone knows something big is coming. They just don't know what. The door opened and Thompson hurried in. Pierce is making moves. Just got word he's called an emergency meeting at Langley. Hillary checked her watch. Then we move now. Sarah? The young analyst nodded, her fingers flying over the keyboards. Deadman switches are set. Multiple servers. Multiple countries. Once we start, they can't stop it. Hillary took a deep breath, thinking of all the pieces that had led them here. The CIA files. George Tenet's note. The security guard's testimony. James Martinez's backup files. All of it ready to expose 20 years of lies. Her phone buzzed again. Unknown number. Is it true? Bill's voice was tense. The Saudi connection. The missing minutes. All of it. You know I can't tell you that. Hills. He paused. Whatever you're about to do, it's going to change everything. The whole system. The system needs changing, Bill. You know that better than anyone. A long silence. Be careful. And Hills? I'm proud of you. As she hung up, Sarah called out. First warning signals. They're trying to shut down our secure channels. How long? Minutes. Maybe. They're good. But... Sarah allowed herself a small smile. I'm better. Mike's phone chirped. Multiple vehicles approaching. Government plates. Hillary moved to the window. Black SUVs were converging on the hotel from different directions. In the distance, she could hear helicopters. Sarah? Almost ready. Just need to. Her fingers danced across the keyboards. There. Everything's in position. The hotel room phone rang. The front desk. Ms. Johnson? There are some federal agents here asking to speak with you. Thank you, Hillary said calmly. Please tell them I'll be right down. She turned to her team. This is it. Sarah, initiate the sequence. Mike, get her to the backup location. Thompson. Already on it, the security expert said, speaking rapidly. Into his radio. Hillary picked up a file. The original note from George Tenet. I'll handle Pierce and his team. Buy you some time. Mrs. Clinton. Sarah stood up, her eyes bright. What you're doing. What we're doing. is going to turn the world upside down. Hillary finished. I know. The young analyst shook her head. Is going to give us back our country. The elevators were shut down, so Hillary took the stairs. Each step felt heavy with history. By the time she reached the lobby, Douglas Pierce was waiting with 4 other agents. You really want to do this here? He asked quietly. In public? The lobby was indeed filling with curious onlookers, phones already recording. Why not? Hillary smiled. I'm tired of shadows, aren't you? You have no idea what you're about to unleash. Actually, I do. That's why we're doing it. Pierce stepped closer, lowering his voice. Think about the consequences. The panic. The chaos. The entire international order could collapse. You mean the order built on lies? On murder? On 20 years of covering up the truth about 9/11? She saw his hand twitch toward his phone. Upstairs, Sarah would be watching their systems, fighting off the digital assault she knew was coming. Last chance, Pierce said. Work with us. We can find a way to… Hillary's phone buzzed. A text from Sarah. It's done. She looked Pierce in the eye. Too late. Around them, phones started pinging. News alerts, social media notifications, email alerts, all carrying pieces of the truth they'd fought so hard to protect. Pierce's phone rang. His face went pale as he listened. How did you… We didn't just send it to the Times, Hillary said. It's everywhere. Every major news outlet, every victim's family lawyer, every oversight committee. Thousands of copies, all releasing at once. Through the lobby windows, she could see more vehicles arriving. FBI, Homeland Security, even military police. You have no idea what you've done, Pierce whispered. No, Hillary corrected him. You have no idea what you did. 20 years ago, when you and others decided the truth was too dangerous. When you chose to bury evidence, to silence witnesses, to build a war on lies. Her phone was buzzing constantly. Now, the story was spreading, faster than anyone could contain it. They'll call you a traitor, Pierce said. Maybe, but history will know the truth. Finally, she walked past him, past the gathering agents, out into the morning sun. News vans were already arriving, cameras rolling. Her phone buzzed one last time. Sarah. Safe. Everything's released. All of it. Hillary Clinton stood on the steps of the hotel, watching as 2 decades of carefully constructed deception began to crumble. The real story of 9/11 was finally reaching the light of day, and not even the most powerful people in the world could stop it now. Somewhere in the growing crowd, she heard someone asking, Is it true? All of it? She thought of George Tenet's note, of the security guard's testimony, of Sarah Chen's courage, of all the others who had died protecting this secret. Yes, she said, as cameras flashed around her. It's all true, and it's time everyone knew. The truth about 9/11 was finally free. Now came the hard part, dealing with the consequences. As reporters began shouting questions, Hillary Clinton stood firm. She had spent her life in the corridors of power, learning how the game was played. Now she had changed the rules forever. Behind her, Pierce and his team were already retreating, their phones buzzing with the chaos unleashing across Washington. But it was too late for damage control, too late for containment. The truth was out there, spreading like wildfire across a world that had waited 20 years to hear it. And nothing would ever be the same again. The next few hours passed in a blur of cameras, questions, and mounting chaos. From her position at the hotel steps, Hillary watched as the world began processing the truth. Mrs. Clinton, reporters shouted. Can you confirm the Saudi connections? What about the missing minutes from the flight recordings? Is it true about George Tenet's warning? She held up her hands for silence. Everything has been documented. The evidence is being released through multiple channels. I ask everyone to read it carefully, to understand. Her phone buzzed. Sarah, turn on any news channel. Now. A journalist thrust his tablet forward, CNN playing live. The headline made her breath catch. Breaking. Saudi officials leave country en masse. Emergency congressional session called. Mrs. Clinton. Pierce's voice came from behind her. He looked different now. Defeated. Almost lost. The president is asking to speak with you. Asking or ordering. At this point, asking. Her phone buzzed again. Marcus from the Times. Stories exploding. Biggest traffic in our history. Other papers confirming independently from their copies. It's unstoppable now. Thompson appeared. At her side. We need to move. Too exposed here. She nodded. But before they could leave, an elderly man pushed through the crowd. His face was streaked with tears. My son, he said, his voice breaking. He was in the North Tower. For 20 years they told us. They made us believe. He grabbed her hand. Thank you. Thank you for the truth. Hillary felt tears in her own eyes. We owed it to all of them. More family members were arriving now, drawn by the breaking news. Their faces showed a mix of emotions. Grief, anger, relief at finally knowing. Safe house is ready, Mike reported quietly. When you are. But before they could move, a new commotion rippled through the crowd. Coming up the street was a familiar face, one that shouldn't have been there. Oh my God, Sarah whispered, emerging from her hiding spot. That's him. That's the security guard from Rutland. The old man moved slowly through the parting crowd, still wearing his diner clothes. Behind him came others. First responders, former FBI agents, intelligence officers, people who had carried pieces of the truth for 20 years. Couldn't let you do this alone, the security guard said gruffly. Figure if you're brave enough to tell it, we're brave enough to confirm it. Hillary felt the weight of the moment. This wasn't just about exposing the truth anymore. It was about healing a wound that had festered for 20 years. Her phone buzzed one final time. A text from Chelsea. Mom, be careful, but I'm proud of you. We all are. Looking at the gathering crowd, the family members, the whistleblowers, the journalists, even the curious bystanders, Hillary Clinton made her final decision. Thompson, she said quietly. Cancel the safe house. I'm not hiding anymore. Mrs. Clinton, no more shadows. No more secrets. She straightened her jacket. The truth about 9/11 is finally out. Now we deal with it. In the open. As if in response, all the phones in the crowd pinged simultaneously. The first detailed stories were dropping. The Times, the Post, the Guardian, all running different pieces of the same massive truth. Pierce's phone rang. His face went ashen as he listened. Finally, he turned to Hillary. They're calling an emergency UN session. The Saudi ambassador just resigned. And he swallowed hard. George Tenet is asking to make a public statement. Hillary thought of his note, still in her pocket, the piece of paper that had helped start this avalanche. Let him, she said. Let them all talk. It's time for the whole truth, not just pieces. The sun was fully up now, a new day dawning over Washington. But it wasn't just another day. It was the day the truth about 9/11 finally came to light. And standing there, surrounded by those who had helped make it happen, Hillary Clinton knew that while the hardest part was over, the real work was just beginning. Because the truth, once released, takes on a life of its own. And this truth would change everything.